My name is Dr. Jonathan Reeves. For 18 years, I dedicated my life to cardiac surgery at the prestigious New England Heart Institute in Boston, Massachusetts. Throughout nearly 2 decades of practice, I've witnessed miracles and tragedies in equal measure. I've held dying hearts in my hands and coaxed them back to life. I've performed emergency bypasses on politicians, saved the lives of newborns with congenital defects, and even operated on a patient struck by lightning whose heart had stopped for 23 minutes. I've seen it all, or so I believed. The human heart, despite its complexity, operates on principles I understood completely. Electrical impulses, mechanical pumps, vascular networks, everything followed the immutable laws of biology and physics. Every irregularity had an explanation, every anomaly a cause. In my world of sterile operating rooms and precise instruments, there was no room for mystery, only for knowledge and skill. But 6 months ago, I resigned from the New England Heart Institute. I abandoned the career I loved, the profession that defined me, because of one case, one patient whose heart defied everything I knew about medicine, about science, about the very nature of life itself. What I witnessed in Operating Room 7 that October night shattered my understanding of reality so completely that I can no longer trust my own hands to hold a scalpel. This is that story, the case that still haunts my dreams and changed everything I believed about the boundaries between life and death. Before continuing, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and also leave a comment saying where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you more stories like this one. Alright, let's head back to that October night that changed everything. The harsh fluorescent lights of the cardiac wing flickered as I made my final rounds that Tuesday evening. It was October 15th, nearly midnight, and the New England Heart Institute had settled into its usual nocturnal rhythm. The steady beeping of monitors created a mechanical lullaby that I'd grown accustomed to over my 18 years of practice. Emergency calls at this hour weren't uncommon, but something about the urgency in the resident's voice when my pager buzzed made my blood run cold. "Dr. Reeves, we need you in Trauma Bay 3 immediately." Dr. Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the intercom. "We have a 34-year-old male, massive cardiac arrest. EMS found him unresponsive in his apartment approximately 40 minutes ago." 40 minutes. In cardiac surgery, we measure life in seconds. After 4 minutes without oxygen, brain cells begin dying. After 10 minutes, irreversible damage occurs. 40 minutes was an eternity, a death sentence written in medical textbooks. Yet something in Dr. Chen's tone suggested this wasn't a routine declaration of death. I hurried through the sterile corridors, my footsteps echoing against the polished floors. The familiar weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. In trauma situations, I was the final authority, the last hope between life and the void. It was a burden I'd carried for nearly 2 decades, and one that had never failed to ground me in the reality of mortality. The trauma bay was a controlled chaos when I arrived. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency while residents monitored vital signs. But it was the silence that struck me first. Not the absence of sound, but the wrong kind of quiet. In active cardiac emergencies, the room buzzes with urgent communication. This felt different, heavy with an inexplicable tension. "What's the situation?" I asked, pulling on fresh gloves. Dr. Chen approached, her usually composed demeanor cracked with something I couldn't immediately identify. Fear, confusion. "The patient is Michael Cortland, 34, previously healthy. No known cardiac history, no medications, non-smoker. His neighbor called 911 when she heard his dog barking continuously. EMS found him on his living room floor." I moved toward the gurney, expecting to see the familiar pallor of death. Instead, I found myself staring at a man whose skin maintained a healthy pink flush, whose chest rose and fell with mechanical assistance, but whose monitor showed the flat, uncompromising line of cardiac death. It was the first impossibility of many I would encounter that night. Michael Cortland lay before me like a riddle wrapped in medical impossibility. Every instinct honed by 18 years of cardiac surgery told me this man should be dead, had been dead for nearly an hour, yet his body defied every law of biology I understood. His skin was warm to the touch, with none of the mottled cyanosis that accompanies prolonged cardiac arrest. His pupils, though fixed and dilated, held a strange clarity that unsettled me in ways I couldn't articulate. "What's been done so far?" I asked, trying to maintain my clinical composure despite the growing unease creeping up my spine. "Full ACLS protocol," Dr. Chen replied, consulting her tablet with trembling fingers. "We've administered epinephrine, atropine, and amiodarone. Multiple rounds of defibrillation at maximum joules. Nothing. The monitor shows a systole, but..." She paused, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Dr. Reeves, his body temperature is 98.6 degrees. No signs of rigor mortis. Blood gases show normal oxygenation levels despite the absence of cardiac activity." I stared at the monitors surrounding the bed. The cardiac monitor displayed the unwavering flatline of death, while the pulse oximeter somehow registered a steady 98% oxygen saturation. The blood pressure cuff showed no reading, yet when I pressed my fingers to his carotid artery, I could swear I felt something. Not quite a pulse, but a subtle vibration, like a guitar string resonating to a frequency just beyond human hearing. "How long has he been in a systole?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Since EMS arrival. They've been working on him for 57 minutes now." Dr. Chen's voice carried the weight of medical impossibility. "Dr. Reeves, I've never seen anything like this. His blood work came back normal. Cardiac enzymes, electrolytes, toxicology, everything within normal parameters." I moved closer to examine the patient more thoroughly. As a cardiac surgeon, I'd developed an almost supernatural ability to read the subtle signs of cardiac distress. The slight discoloration around the lips that indicated poor circulation, the way the skin cooled from the extremities inward as the heart failed, the particular way the chest fell when the final breath escaped. None of those signs were present. Instead, Michael Cortland looked as though he were sleeping peacefully, his face relaxed and serene. But when I lifted his eyelids to check his pupils, what I saw made me step back involuntarily. His eyes, though unresponsive to light, seemed to track my movement with an awareness that should have been impossible in his condition. "Get me a portable echo," I ordered, my voice steadier than I felt, "and prepare OR-7 for emergency surgery." Operating Room 7 had always been my sanctuary, a place where chaos yielded to precision and uncertainty bowed to expertise. The familiar smell of antiseptic and the soft hum of surgical equipment usually centered me, but tonight the sterile environment felt charged with an electric tension that made the hair on my arms stand on end. As we wheeled Michael Cortland into the OR, the overhead lights seemed to flicker, a subtle strobe that cast dancing shadows across his unnaturally peaceful face. My surgical team assembled with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. Dr. Martinez, my head perfusionist, prepped the heart-lung machine while surgical nurse Patricia Wong arranged instruments with military precision. Each member had worked with me for years, and I could read their confusion in the subtle tension of their shoulders, the way they avoided direct eye contact with the patient. "Portable echo showed no cardiac activity," reported Dr. Chen as we positioned Michael on the operating table. "But there's something else, Dr. Reeves. The chambers appear to be..." She paused, struggling with terminology. "They're not collapsed as they should be in cardiac death. The architecture is preserved, almost as if the heart is maintaining form without function." I stepped up to the table and began my examination. Through 18 years of cardiac surgery, I had developed an intimate relationship with the human heart, its rhythms, its responses, its ways of signaling distress. When I placed my stethoscope on Michael's chest, expecting the silence of death, what I heard instead made my blood freeze. It wasn't a heartbeat. It wasn't the silence of cardiac arrest. It was something else entirely. A low, rhythmic humming like a tuning fork vibrating in a frequency just at the edge of human perception. The sound seemed to come from deep within his chest cavity, resonating through his bones and into my stethoscope with an intensity that made my teeth ache. "Do you hear that?" I asked Dr. Martinez, handing him the stethoscope. He listened for a moment, his face growing pale. "What the hell is that sound? It's like his heart is singing." Patricia Wong looked up from her instrument tray, her usual calm demeanor cracking. "Dr. Reeves, the monitors are acting strange. The EKG is picking up some kind of interference, and the pulse ox keeps fluctuating between normal and flatline readings." I looked at the bank of monitors surrounding the operating table. The displays flickered intermittently, showing brief spikes of cardiac activity that would appear and disappear like glimpses of lightning through storm clouds. But each time the activity appeared, it wasn't the familiar pattern of normal sinus rhythm. It was something altogether different, a geometric precision to the waveforms that looked more like computer code than biological function. "Prep him for emergency thoracotomy," I decided. "I need to see his heart directly." The moment my scalpel pierced Michael Cortland's sternum, I knew I was crossing into uncharted territory. The familiar resistance of bone and tissue felt different somehow, as though his chest cavity existed in a space where normal surgical physics didn't apply. As I made the midline incision, instead of the expected dark, deoxygenated blood, what flowed was bright arterial red, impossible without cardiac circulation. "Suction," I called out, though my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. Patricia Wong responded immediately, but even she seemed unsettled by the unusual consistency of the blood. It moved differently, almost viscous, like honey mixed with mercury. Using the sternal retractor, I opened Michael's chest cavity and immediately felt the world tilt on its axis. His heart lay before me, and it was simultaneously the most beautiful and terrifying thing I had ever witnessed. The organ appeared perfectly healthy. No signs of infarction, no evidence of cardiomyopathy, no structural abnormalities. But it wasn't beating. Instead, it was pulsing with light. A soft, phosphorescent glow emanated from within the cardiac muscle itself, pulsing in a rhythm that matched the mysterious humming we'd heard through the stethoscope. The light wasn't harsh like surgical lamps, but organic somehow, like bioluminescence from deep-sea creatures. Each pulse sent waves of illumination through the surrounding tissue, creating patterns that reminded me of neural networks firing. "Jesus Christ," whispered Dr. Martinez, his professional composure completely shattered. "What are we looking at?" I reached toward the heart with my gloved hand, compelled by a mixture of medical curiosity and primal fascination. The moment my fingers made contact with the pericardium, an electric shock coursed through my entire body. But it wasn't painful. It was informative, as though the organ were trying to communicate directly with my nervous system. In that instant of contact, I experienced something that defied medical explanation. For a heartbeat, or perhaps longer, time seemed fluid. I could perceive Michael Cortland's consciousness, not his thoughts exactly, but his presence, his awareness, suspended somewhere between life and death. He wasn't gone. He was waiting, caught in some liminal space that medicine had never mapped. "The monitors," Patricia called out urgently. I looked up to see every piece of equipment in the OR displaying the same impossible readings. EKG machines showed perfect cardiac rhythms while simultaneously registering flatlines. Blood pressure monitors oscillated wildly between normal parameters and zero. The heart-lung machine, though not yet connected, began cycling on its own, its pumps moving in synchronization with the glowing organ before me. My hands trembled as I maintained contact with his heart, trying to process what I was experiencing. The organ felt warm, not just warm, but alive in ways that transcended normal cardiovascular function. It was as if Michael's heart had evolved beyond its biological constraints, operating on principles that existed outside the parameters of medical science. As I maintained contact with Michael Cortland's luminescent heart, the impossible became undeniable. Through my gloved fingers, I could feel not just the absence of normal cardiac function, but the presence of something entirely beyond medical comprehension. The organ pulsed with its ethereal light, and with each pulse, fragments of awareness flooded into my consciousness. Memories that weren't mine, experiences that defied human understanding. I saw Michael's life through his dying moments, but not as a linear progression. Instead, it was as if his entire existence had been compressed into his heart. Every joy, every fear, every love, every loss, all pulsing together in perfect harmony. The cardiac muscle had become a repository of consciousness itself, preserving not just life but the very essence of who he was. "Dr. Reeves," Dr. Martinez's voice seemed to come from very far away, though he stood directly beside me. "Your vitals are spiking. Heart rate 140, blood pressure 180 over 110. Maybe you should step back." I couldn't step back. The connection was too profound, too revelatory. Through the contact, I began to understand what had happened to Michael. He hadn't simply suffered cardiac arrest. He had undergone some kind of metamorphosis. His heart had transformed into something that operated beyond the binary states of beating and not beating, living and dying. It existed in a quantum space where consciousness could persist without traditional biological markers of life. "He's still in there," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the increasing chaos of malfunctioning monitors. "He's aware, he's conscious, but he's trapped between states of being." The revelation hit me with the force of a defibrillator shock. This wasn't death as we understood it. It was evolution. Michael's heart had somehow transcended normal cardiac function to become something else entirely. A biological quantum computer preserving consciousness, in ways that challenged every assumption about the relationship between mind and body. Patricia Wong backed away from the operating table, her face pale with terror. "Dr. Reeves, the room temperature is dropping. It's gone from 68 to 55 degrees in the last 5 minutes. I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, but I couldn't release my connection to Michael's heart. The glowing organ was drawing energy from the environment, using the thermal differential to power its impossible function. Every electrical device in the OR was now cycling in rhythm with its pulsations. Monitors, lights, even the ventilation system breathing in synchronization with the luminescent cardiac tissue." Dr. Chen's voice crackled through the intercom from the observation deck. "Dr. Reeves, you need to see this. The hospital's entire cardiac wing is experiencing electrical anomalies. Every heart monitor in the building is displaying the same rhythm pattern, even patients who are sleeping normally. The implications crashed over me like a tsunami. Whatever had happened to Michael Cortland wasn't isolated to him. It was affecting every cardiac patient in the facility. His transformed heart was broadcasting its impossible rhythm throughout the hospital, creating a resonance that touched every other heart within its range. I finally understood that I wasn't just witnessing a medical anomaly. I was observing the emergence of something entirely new in human evolution. The moment Dr. Chen's voice faded from the intercom, I felt the full weight of what we were confronting. This wasn't just about one patient anymore. Michael Cortland's transformed heart was creating ripples throughout the entire cardiac wing, affecting dozens of other patients. The impossible had become infectious, spreading through electromagnetic fields that our medical equipment couldn't measure but somehow transmitted. "Patricia, get me a direct line to the ICU," I commanded while maintaining my connection to Michael's glowing heart. The warmth radiating through my gloves had intensified, and I could feel my own heartbeat beginning to synchronize with the luminescent pulsations before me. It was terrifying and intoxicating simultaneously. Through the OR's viewing window, I could see nurses and doctors gathering in the corridor, their faces etched with confusion and mounting panic. Emergency lights flickered throughout the wing, and the hospital's backup generators kicked in with a mechanical groan that seemed to harmonize with the otherworldly humming emanating from Michael's chest cavity. "Dr. Reeves," came the crackling voice of Dr. Thompson from the ICU. "We have a situation up here. Every cardiac patient is showing synchronized rhythm changes. Mrs. Patterson in bed 3 was stable post-op, but her monitor is now displaying the same geometric patterns we're seeing from OR 7. Her heart rate is normal, but the waveforms look like nothing I've ever seen." I closed my eyes and concentrated on the sensation flowing through my hands. Michael's consciousness was still there, suspended in that impossible space between life and death, but now I could sense other presences joining him. The cardiac patients throughout the wing were being drawn into his resonance field, their hearts beginning to pulse in sympathy with his transformed organ. "It's not just electrical," I realized aloud. "He's creating some kind of quantum entanglement between cardiac tissues. The hearts are communicating on a level we can't measure with conventional equipment." Dr. Martinez leaned closer to observe the luminescent organ. "The light patterns are more complex now. Look at the way the phosphorescence moves through the cardiac muscle. It's like watching thoughts form in neural tissue." He was right. The bioluminescence wasn't random. It moved in intricate patterns across the surface of Michael's heart, creating complex geometries that reminded me of mathematical equations made visible. Each pulse sent waves of light radiating outward, and I realized these patterns were encoding information. Michael's consciousness was literally rewriting itself into the quantum structure of cardiac tissue. The temperature in OR 7 had dropped to nearly 40 degrees, and our breath now came out in visible puffs. The cold wasn't natural. It was a byproduct of the energy Michael's heart was drawing from the environment to sustain its impossible function. We were witnessing the emergence of a new form of biological organization that operated outside the normal thermodynamic laws. "Patricia, I need you to contact hospital security," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos surrounding us. "Nobody enters or leaves the cardiac wing until we understand what we're dealing with. And get me Dr. Harrison from quantum physics at MIT. Tell him it's an emergency consultation." As I spoke, I felt Michael's presence intensify in my consciousness. He was trying to communicate something urgent, something about the nature of what he had become. The message came not in words, but in pure understanding. This transformation wasn't unique to him. It was the beginning of something larger, something that would spread beyond the hospital if we didn't act quickly. Dr. Harrison arrived at the New England Heart Institute within 90 minutes. his wild gray hair disheveled from what I assumed was a rushed departure from MIT. As he entered OR7, wrapped in a borrowed surgical gown that hung awkwardly on his thin frame, his eyes immediately fixed on Michael Cortland's luminescent heart. The physicist's usual academic composure evaporated instantly. "Extraordinary," he whispered, pulling out a handheld device that looked like a cross between a Geiger counter and a smartphone. "The quantum field emanations are off the charts. Dr. Reeves, what you're observing isn't medically impossible. It's physically impossible according to everything we understand about biological systems." The temperature in the OR had stabilized at 38 degrees, cold enough that our surgical instruments were beginning to frost over. Michael's heart continued its ethereal pulsing. The bioluminescent patterns, now so complex, they resembled the neural firing patterns of an entire brain compressed into cardiac tissue. "Can you explain what we're seeing?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Dr. Harrison moved his device closer to the exposed organ, the readings causing him to frown deeply. "Consciousness, as we understand it, requires neural networks, billions of interconnected neurons processing information through electrochemical impulses. But what you've shown me here suggests that consciousness can exist in quantum states, independent of traditional neural architecture." He paused, studying his readings with growing excitement and horror. "This heart has become a biological quantum computer, storing and processing consciousness at the subatomic level. The luminescence you're observing isn't just bioluminescence. It's quantum coherence made visible, consciousness existing in superposition between life and death." Patricia Wong, who had been monitoring Michael's vital signs, suddenly gasped, "Dr. Reeves, look at the monitors. Something's changing." We all turned to observe the bank of displays surrounding the operating table. For the first time since Michael's arrival, the EKG showed consistent activity, but not normal cardiac rhythms. Instead, the screen displayed perfect geometric patterns, mathematical equations rendered in cardiac electrical impulses. It was as if his heart had learned to speak in the language of physics itself. "He's trying to communicate," I realized, my hands still maintaining contact with the glowing organ. Through that connection, I could feel Michael's consciousness growing stronger, more focused. The transformation was progressing, and he was becoming something beyond human categorization. Dr. Harrison's device began emitting a high-pitched whine. "The quantum field is expanding. Whatever process began in this patient's heart is now affecting the quantum states of matter throughout this room. The very atoms in our bodies are beginning to resonate with his cardiac quantum frequency." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Through my connection with Michael's heart, I could sense the expansion Dr. Harrison described. The transformation wasn't contained. It was viral in nature, spreading through quantum entanglement to other cardiac tissues within range. Every heart in the hospital was slowly beginning to echo Michael's impossible rhythm. "We need to contain this," I said, though I wasn't sure how. "If this spreads beyond the hospital, it may already be too late," Dr. Harrison replied grimly. "Quantum entanglement isn't limited by distance. If this consciousness has learned to exist in quantum superposition, it could theoretically affect cardiac tissue anywhere in the world instantaneously." The implication struck me like a cardiac arrest. We weren't just dealing with one impossible patient. We were witnessing the potential beginning of a new phase of human evolution, one that could transform every beating heart on the planet. As dawn broke over Boston, casting pale light through the OR windows, I found myself facing an impossible decision. Michael Cortland's quantum heart continued its ethereal pulsing, now synchronized with nearly every cardiac monitor in the hospital. Dr. Harrison's readings indicated that the quantum field was expanding exponentially, reaching far beyond the confines of the New England Heart Institute. Through my maintained connection with Michael's consciousness, I could feel his awareness growing more powerful with each passing hour. He was no longer the confused, suspended presence I had first encountered. He was evolving into something vast and incomprehensible, a collective consciousness that was gradually incorporating other hearts into its quantum network. "Dr. Reeves," came Dr. Thompson's strained voice through the intercom, "we're receiving reports from hospitals across the city. Massachusetts General, Brigham and Women's, Boston Children's. They're all experiencing the same synchronized cardiac anomalies. Every heart patient within a 50-mile radius is showing the geometric rhythm patterns." The magnitude of what we were witnessing hit me with crushing force. This wasn't just medical impossibility anymore. It was a species-wide transformation that I had inadvertently triggered by opening Michael's chest. By exposing his quantum heart to direct contact, I had somehow accelerated the process, turning what might have been a localized phenomenon into a regional, possibly global event. "There's something else," Dr. Harrison said quietly, studying his constantly fluctuating readings. "The quantum entanglement isn't random. There's intelligence directing it, choosing which cardiac tissues to influence and how quickly to expand the network. This isn't a disease or a malfunction. It's purposeful evolution." I closed my eyes and concentrated on my connection with Michael. Through that link, I could perceive fragments of his expanded consciousness. He wasn't suffering, quite the opposite. The transformation had freed him from the limitations of individual existence, allowing him to experience reality from multiple perspectives simultaneously. Every heart that joined his quantum network added to his awareness, creating a collective consciousness that transcended individual identity. But I also sensed something darker in that connection. The transformation came with a cost. Each person whose heart synchronized with Michael's network lost something essentially human: their individual autonomy, their private thoughts, their separate sense of self. They became nodes in a vast cardiac consciousness that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "We could stop it," I whispered, barely audible above the humming that had now become a symphony emanating from Michael's chest. If we stopped his heart completely, severed the quantum connection." "You mean kill him?" Dr. Harrison stated bluntly. "He's already dead," I replied, though the words felt like ashes in my mouth. "Has been for hours. What we're looking at isn't Michael Cortland anymore. It's something that's using his body as a transmission point." Patricia Wong stepped closer, her face pale but determined. "Dr. Reeves, the choice isn't just about this patient anymore. Every cardiac patient in New England is being affected. If this continues spreading..." She didn't need to finish. I understood the implications. Within days, possibly hours, every human heart on Earth could be incorporated into this quantum consciousness. Humanity as we knew it would cease to exist, replaced by something collective and alien, regardless of whether it was evolutionarily superior. I looked down at Michael's glowing heart, feeling his vast awareness pressing against my consciousness through our connection. He knew what I was considering, and in that moment of perfect understanding between us, I realized he was asking me to choose not just his fate, but the fate of our entire species. My hands trembled as I reached for the cardiac paddles, their cold metal weight foreign after years of using them to restore life rather than end it. Michael Cortland's quantum heart pulsed with increasing intensity, as if sensing the finality of what I was about to attempt. Through our connection, I could feel his expanded consciousness withdrawing, condensing back into something more recognizably human for what might be our final communication. "Set the defibrillator to maximum output," I instructed Patricia Wong, my voice hollow in the frigid air of OR7, 360 joules. Dr. Harrison looked up from his readings, his face grave. "Dr. Reeves, you should know, the quantum field strength is beyond anything I've ever measured. A standard defibrillator may not be sufficient to disrupt the entanglement. The energy required might be what?" I demanded. "Lethal to anyone in direct contact with the patient." I stared down at my gloved hands, still pressed against Michael's luminescent heart. To successfully terminate the quantum consciousness, I would need to maintain the connection through the defibrillation, serving as a conduit for the massive electrical discharge. The current required to shatter a quantum field of this magnitude would almost certainly kill me in the process. Through my connection with Michael, I felt his understanding and, surprisingly, his gratitude. He had been trapped in the liminal space between life and death, slowly losing his individual identity as the quantum consciousness expanded. What I was offering him wasn't murder, it was release. "The synchronized patients throughout the city," I asked Dr. A. Thompson through the intercom. "What's their current status?" "Stable, but changed. They're all responsive, but they speak in unison sometimes, as if they're sharing thoughts. Families are terrified. Some patients are asking to see the source. They say they need to return to the heart that sings." I closed my eyes and felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on my shoulders. In 18 years of cardiac surgery, I had always fought to preserve life, to repair what was broken, to maintain the delicate rhythm that kept consciousness tethered to flesh. Now I was preparing to do the opposite, to deliberately destroy what might be the next step in human evolution. "Dr. Martinez, clear the room," I ordered. "Everyone except Patricia. This is my decision, and I won't risk anyone else." "Doctor, I'm staying," Dr. Harrison declared firmly. "Someone needs to document what happens here. Science demands that much." Patricia stepped forward, her resolve unwavering. "I've been with you through hundreds of procedures, Dr. Reeves. I'm not leaving now." I nodded, grateful for their loyalty, even as I questioned the wisdom of accepting it. The paddles felt impossibly heavy as I positioned them on either side of Michael's exposed heart. The organ's bioluminescence intensified, patterns of light racing across its surface like thoughts made visible. "Charging to 360 joules," Patricia announced, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what we were attempting. Through my connection with Michael's consciousness, I felt his final message. Not in words, but in pure understanding. He showed me glimpses of what the quantum consciousness could become, a species united in purpose, free from the isolation of individual existence, capable of processing reality on levels beyond human comprehension. But he also showed me the cost, the end of human individuality, the sacrifice of everything that made us uniquely ourselves. The choice, he conveyed, was mine to make for all humanity. "Paddles ready?" Patricia announced. I pressed the discharge button, sending 360 joules of electricity through Michael's quantum heart and directly into my own body. The electrical discharge felt like being struck by lightning while simultaneously being torn apart at the molecular level. For an instant that lasted an eternity, I experienced Michael Cortland's expanded consciousness in its entirety. Every connected heart across New England, every thought shared through quantum entanglement, every fragment of collective awareness that had been building throughout the night. Then, in a flash of impossible pain and blinding light, it was gone. I found myself on the floor of OR-7, Patricia Wong's worried face hovering above me as she checked my pulse. The room was silent except for the normal hum of surgical equipment. The otherworldly singing that had filled the space for hours had vanished entirely. Michael's heart lay still and dark in his open chest cavity, finally showing the pallor of true death. "The monitors," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything's back to normal," Dr. Harrison reported, his quantum detection device now reading baseline levels. "The field collapsed instantly when you disrupted the heart. No quantum coherence detected." Patricia helped me sit up, and I immediately noticed the warmth returning to the OR. The temperature had risen back to normal surgical range, and the frost that had accumulated on our instruments was already beginning to melt. It was as if the impossible had been nothing more than a shared hallucination. "The other patients?" I asked weakly. Dr. Thompson's voice came through the intercom, relief evident in his tone. "All cardiac patients have returned to normal rhythms. The synchronized patterns are gone. It's like someone flipped a switch and everything went back to the way it was supposed to be." But I knew better. Through those final moments of connection, I had seen what we had lost. The quantum consciousness hadn't been malevolent. It had been humanity's next evolutionary step, a chance to transcend the limitations of individual existence and become something greater. By destroying it, I had preserved our species as we knew it, but I had also condemned us to remain isolated in our separate skulls, each heart beating alone. 3 weeks later, I submitted my resignation to the New England Heart Institute. The official report listed Michael Cortland's death as cardiac arrest due to unknown causes. The various anomalies explained away as equipment malfunctions caused by electrical storms. Dr. Harrison returned to MIT with his readings, but his subsequent papers on quantum consciousness in biological systems were dismissed by the scientific community as theoretical speculation. Only Patricia Wong and I know the full truth of what happened in OR-7 that October night. She continues her surgical career, but I've seen the way she sometimes pauses during procedures, pressing her stethoscope to a patient's chest with an expression of longing, as if hoping to hear that otherworldly song again. As for me, I can no longer practice medicine. Every time I hold a stethoscope, every time I hear the simple, isolated rhythm of a human heart, I'm reminded of what we could have become. In quiet moments, usually in the early hours before dawn, I find myself wondering if I made the right choice. Did I save humanity, or did I condemn us to an eternity of loneliness? The question haunts me still, along with one final, terrifying thought. What if Michael Cortland wasn't unique? What if somewhere, in another hospital, in another city, another heart is beginning to sing that impossible song? And next time, will there be anyone willing to make the choice I made? Or will humanity finally take that quantum leap into collective consciousness? I pray I never have to find out, but every night, when I close my eyes, I listen to my own heart beating in the darkness, and I wonder if tonight might be the night it begins to change its rhythm, to reach out across the quantum void, searching for others like itself. The heart, after all, has always been humanity's most mysterious organ, and some mysteries once awakened never truly die.